Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and today we'll be revisiting a series that actually started out this channel just about a year ago. And what might that be? Rewriting WrestleMania. And yes, we are in WrestleMania season, and today we're going to be rewriting WrestleMania 9, April the 4th, 1993, live from Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was the first time they did an outdoor venue for such an event on the West Coast, or a little more, well, they're landlocked, but as close enough to the West Coast as you can possibly be. And it was broad daylight the entire time. Excuse me. So it was a different dynamic for a setting. And of course, we had the Roman Colosseum theme and about 16,000 inside the actual Caesar's Palace Colosseum at the time. And this is actually not one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time, if I do say so myself, mainly because of one man who just couldn't put his ego off to the side to let a new generation of wrestlers, so to speak, take the stand, at least for this evening. And I'm talking about Hulk Hogan. So the way I'm going to rewrite WrestleMania 9, there will not be any Hulk Hogan on the card. He should have been gone by that point in time, after WrestleMania 8. So, there are some bad WrestleManias out there, and a few that come to mind are WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 11, WrestleMania 27, 22, I think, is probably one of the worst of all time, mainly from the storyline perspective. And then 9 isn't as bad, but it could have been so much better. So we're going to make it better by rewriting it. So let's get right into it, shall we? So there'd be no dark matches, but I'd book 12 matches for this evening. And the first match would be a singles bout featuring the Native American Tatanka taking on the bad guy Razor Ramon. Now, Tatanka had an undefeated streak that was ultimately ended by Ludwig Borga in the fall of '93, of all people. Ludwig Borga ended the undefeated streak, and it lasted about almost 2 years. And Tatanka was still undefeated at this point in time, and Razor Ramon was still brand spanking new to the wrestling scene in the World Wrestling Federation. He was pushed in the main event right away with Survivor Series 92 in that tag match with Ric Flair against Savage and Perfect. And then, of course, the Rumble of '93, he had that main event rub going, challenging Brett for the world title. And yeah, he was kind of stalling now by this point. He wasn't quite put in the Intercontinental title picture yet, but that would come a little bit later on. So Razor and Tatanka, I'd be hard pressed to find a time they actually ever crossed paths, and the most I could think of is maybe on a Coliseum video release like Invasion of the Body Slammers or Smack 'em Whack 'em or Wham Bam Body Slam, like late '94, early '95 when Tatanka was in the $1 Million Corporation. So this match would be a pretty standard singles bout. I'd give them at least 15 minutes. There's a lot they could do. Razor was pretty agile for a big guy at like 6'7", 289 pounds. And then Tatanka was pretty agile, but both men had a lot of strength to boot, so I think their styles would work well off of each other. And ultimately, I'd give the Duke to Tatanka just to keep the undefeated streak going a little bit. Razor, he'll get his chance to shine a little bit later on down the line, so I'm not too worried about him winning this match in particular. So I think that match is good. Our next match would be pretty much, I'd keep this one the same. So let me talk about in real time before we even get to the next match. Now, Tatanka in real time challenged Shawn Michaels for the IC title, which was probably the best match of the night, though many of the matches at WrestleMania 9 were not the greatest. But this match was good. It wasn't great, Michaels Tatanka. And I think it was more cannon fodder because it took a back seat to the sensational Sherry and Luna feud that was going on, and you had Luna in Shawn Michaels' corner, Luna Vachon, and it didn't really make sense from a storyline standpoint because there was no mutual attraction, so to speak. And same with Tatanka and Sherry, because Sherry had broken up with Shawn Michaels a few months prior. So yeah, I think that kind of took a back seat and that took away from the match. And the match itself, I felt could have used more time, and then I didn't like the DQ finish at the end. So, yeah, it had every right to be a better match than what it was, but it certainly wasn't terrible. Now, this next match did happen in real time, but only I would change the outcome. It's a tag team affair with the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, taking on the Head Shrinkers, Samu and Fatu. Now, in real time, the Steiner brothers actually won that night. But I actually give the Head Shrinkers the victory because I feel like they need a little bit more boost with their heel tag teams because you have Money Inc. running rampant in the tag division as far as the heels are concerned, and the other heels seem to kind of take a back seat. Like you had the Beverly Brothers losing a lot, and yeah, the Nasty Boys when they were heels, and they just recently turned faces. I'm trying to think what other heel tag teams you had. Doesn't seem like you have a whole lot to choose from. So yeah, give the head shrinkers the win here. That Alpha would be at ringside and he could, cheat to help them win. Use some dastardly tactics on the outside and be a distraction, no less, to Rick and Scott. So that's all I could say about that match. Next match would also be kind of a repeat as far as what happened in real time. Crush versus Doink the Clown. Wow. Doink the Clown at this point in time was a great heel played by Maniac Matt Bourne. Matt Bourne actually competed at WrestleMania 1 and lost to Ricky Steamboat in a singles bout. And Doink had been playing pranks on many wrestlers upon his debut in late 92 to the World Wrestling Federation, namely Crush. And Crush had had enough of his antics, and at one point Doink took out a weighted fake arm and he whacked him right in the back of the head, and that made him miss the Royal Rumble that year and several weeks of action, no less. And Crush basically just wanted to fight for all that was good. And that's Crush was played by a journeyman named Brian Adams. No, not the singer Brian Adams, Summer of '69, Heaven, whatever. But this Brian Adams, he's not the greatest in-ring performer, not the greatest promo guy, but he had a great look to him. He had the look that, I guess Vince McMahon wanted at the time, big muscular guy. And, he had a good presence, and that's about where everything ends because in the ring he was just very basic. He wasn't a bad wrestler, but his moveset was not quite that impressive other than the cranium crunch to make your opponent submit. This is cranium crunch. And, yes, he had a lot of iterations with his gimmicks. So there was the Hawaiian Powerhouse, but before that was Demolition. He was a replacement for Axe because Axe had a shellfish allergy that he contracted on a tour of Japan in 1990. So he had Smash and Crush, which didn't lead to a lot of success for Demolition in the latter part of their time together. And then, of course, you had the Hawaiian Powerhouse because then he took a hiatus and then came back to the company from 92 to 93. And then he turned heel upon returning from an injury because then he was Banzai dropped by Yokozuna, and I was going to say sumo drop. That would have been wrong. Banzai dropped by Yokozuna several times, and he accused Randy Savage of his best friend at the time of not coming to his aid, despite sitting a few feet away at ringside. And that led to the heel turn for Crush, where he sported a goatee. A lot of times when a wrestler sports a goatee and they haven't before, it usually signifies a heel turn. It's just a symbolic thing, I guess us wrestling fans tend to pick up on. Doesn't mean that for every single wrestler that comes to the WWF or whatever, but it's just something, it's just sort of a trend or a trope, if you will. And he took on a American turncoat, a Japanese turncoat gimmick, because then he aligned himself with Mr. Fuji and Yokozuna moving forward. And he talked about hating everything American and liking things Japanese, like Toyota and sushi, whatever. And that gimmick didn't really do much. It just is the Randy Savage feud and WrestleMania 10 and the False Count Anywhere match, and that's probably the height of Crush's run in the Japanese turncoat gimmick. Then he actually was incarcerated. It was like early 95, because you didn't see him after the 95 Rumble. I forget what exactly he did, but then he was brought back in the summer of 96 and was paired with Clarence Mason, who was a parody of Johnny Cochran, who was O.J. Simpson's attorney during that whole trial. And he was given the jailbird gimmick, which I don't think would age well today, just because of, how perception in society has changed, all things considered. So that gimmick then merged with the Nation of Domination because Clarence Mason was also managing Farouk, and then, Crush was one of Farouk's henchmen in the group. Just naturally, it just sort of happened organically, and then the Nation of Domination was born, and then when Crush was fired from the Nation, then the DOA, the Biker Disciples of Apocalypse, the whole biker gimmick, that was the last we saw of Brian Adams, and then unfortunately he passed in the summer of 2007, not long after Chris Benoit died. So Brian Adams, give the man credit, might not be the greatest wrestler of all time, but he manages to stay relevant by hook or by crook. in any capacity. So, that's more than I can say for a lot of people that I'll probably be talking about today, as far as people that stuck around a long time. He might not have won any championships per se, but he certainly left an indelible mark on the industry one way or another. So back to this match. I'm sorry I'm getting a little off topic. I would actually have Crush get the Duke in this one, the win here, because you had guys like Steve Kern and Steve Lombardi dressed up as other Doinks, which they could do in this match. But in all fairness, this is a match that deserved to have the face to win because there was never a great payoff to it. Doink won in real time at Mania. The referee was knocked out, and the other ref claimed to not have seen the other Doinks under the ring and then cheating. And then they had like a rematch on Raw, which was like a shitty DQ count out win for Crush, I believe. And then, I think they just continued to interfere in matches, and then out of thin air, the feud just stopped. So give Crush the win on this one. You need that feel-good moment, and this would be the match to do it. And then as for Doink, he didn't really need the win. He'd just go on his merry way, continuing to do whatever he could, performing more heelish pranks on his fellow face wrestlers. So it wouldn't last much longer because by the end of the year in '93, he turned face. And as a kid, I always loved the babyface Doink, but as a kid, it's different when you're looking at it, not knowing fully how wrestling works. So yeah, give Crush the win on this one, but that'd probably be the pinnacle of his career as Kona Hawaiian Powerhouse Crush. So that's that. Our next match would be the first of 4 championships to be decided here tonight. The Tag Team Championship, Money Incorporated with their manager, Jimmy Hart, defending against the Nasty Boys. Now, this stems from the fall of '92. Jimmy Hart had whittled down his clientele to just Money Inc., Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, leaving Knobs and Sags of the Nasty Boys in the lurch, just like he did earlier in the year to the Natural Disasters. So when the Natural Disasters were set to defend their tag titles in October of '92, I think it was on Superstars or Wrestling Challenge at the time, Nasty Boys were next in line. But what does Jimmy Hart do? He swaps them out at the last minute and gives their title shot to Money Inc. yet again. So the Nasty Boys are fed up, and they feel hurt and betrayed by their longtime manager, Jimmy Hart. And so this would be, they had a lot of house show matches where Money Inc. retained the belts and maybe lost by like count out or DQ, as was common in those days when you had the same guys facing each other on the house show circuit many times over. Now, in real time, it was the Mega Maniacs, Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake, challenging Money Inc., and by that point in time, Jimmy Hart had already turned face, which they really shouldn't have done because I always liked Jimmy Hart better as a heel manager, although this was kind of a weird pairing with Money Inc. Like, I get why DiBiase and Shyster were together, because you had a corrupt millionaire and an evil tax accountant, both gimmicks having to do with money, naturally. And here we are talking about taxes and tax season, naturally. And Jimmy Hart was just there because they were feuding with his other proteges. So, that was just more a circumstantial thing, more than, because the gimmicks work well, if you catch my drift. So, yeah, I would keep Jimmy with them, and he would continue to betray Knobs and Sags and use the megaphone in the match and cheat every which way he can. And, I'd have DiBiase and Shyster pick up the win. Definitely not a clean win, and continue on their merry ways. Because I think Knobs and Sags were going to be heading out of the company around this time, and they'd be going back to WCW. So I don't see what more we could do with the Nasty Boys, quite honestly. Though they were great, and I'll never forget the pit stop. Oh man, what a gross move that was. The armpit, but I'm not even going to do that here. Okay, next match. This next one was actually the dark match in real time. Let me take a sip of water. And funny, I'm saying dark match, and the match is taking place in complete broad daylight. I just didn't turn the stadium lights on for it. El Matador, Tito Santana versus Papa Shango. And in real time, Matador actually won the match, and I would keep that result exactly the same, though I'd cut down the time on this match because Charles Wright, Papa Shango, who, by the way, I met at WrestleCon Philadelphia 2 years ago, one of the nicest guys in the wrestling business. We actually had a good, lengthy 3-minute conversation, got a picture with him and everything. I was asking about his former gimmicks, like the Good Father and Supreme Fighting Machine, and what comma stood for, I forget. And then I also asked about, what else did we talk about that night? We took a few poses, even the Nation right here. And oh, yeah, Owen Hart, because he was supposed to face him at Over the Edge and how he reacted to that evening. And yeah, there's just a couple other things too that we talked about. And but yeah, just tell deep down he's a nice guy, takes a lot of time to speak with his fans. Despite the gimmick of a pimp that he presented as the Godfather, deep down he seems like he really cares about his fan base and just a good guy all around. And as that's more than I could say for a lot of people in the wrestling business, quite frankly. So, anyways, as nice a guy as he is, he's not the greatest wrestler, so I wouldn't give Charles Wright a whole lot of time in his matches. 10 minutes would be too long for this one. Like 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes probably, and then Matador would win with like a roll up, a victory roll sort of thing. And because he's, Charles Wright is much bigger than Tito Santana, so Santana have to use a lot of aerial offense here to knock down the big man. So that's that. This now we're at match number 6. Okay, we're at the halfway point. The Intercontinental Championship, our second of 3 titles to be decided here tonight. Shawn Michaels with Sensational Sherry still in his corner, defending against Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Now, Brutus Beefcake hadn't been seen in actively wrestling for the WWF in about 2.5 years. It was the summer of 1990 when he had that god-awful parasailing accident. I think somebody in his boat took off, and they didn't realize that Beefcake was right there. I forget exactly how the story goes, but I do remember that Beefcake, somebody's knees knocked right into his face, broke his nose, and destroyed all the facial features, and he needed like 8-9 hours of reconstructive surgery with screws and plates put in everywhere. It was almost ended his life. He said the pain was so bad he just wanted to die. So Beefcake, I don't think ever fully recovered from that, because it's not like his wrestling career skyrocketed or anything after that point. And I hate to say it, because he was set to, I think, win the IC title in the summer of 1990 for Mr. Perfect, and that's when Texas Tornado had to be a last-minute replacement. So they scrambled there. So Beefcake, while he was inactive from physically wrestling, he hosted the Barbershop segment on TV from 91 to 92, and then he came back in 93, finally got cleared by his doctors and maybe the WWF doctor at the time to be able to get back in the ring. And he took on the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, one half of the tag champs at the time. And this is where Jimmy Hart turned face, because he didn't like that DiBiase and Shyster were hell-bent on re-injuring the surgically repaired face of the Barber. And Jimmy Hart uncharacteristically stepped in the ring and threw his body over a fallen Beefcake. It was like, no, don't do this to him. And yeah, quite literally a change of heart, pun intended, for Jimmy Hart himself. And it just didn't feel natural to have Jimmy Hart as a babyface when he'd been a heel all this time. I just think he should have just kept it as is. Some people just work better as natural heels, and some work better as natural faces, and this is a perfect example of that. Or sometimes they have a heel or a face within them and we just don't know it. But in this case, yeah, it should have just stayed keeping Jimmy the heel. But Jimmy's not going to be in this match. So Shawn Michaels and Brutus Beefcake, the reason I'd have these two feud is because Shawn could actually, being the pretty boy, the boy toy that he is, could, mock him for not being so good looking after that accident. I could totally see Shawn cutting a promo where he'd say something along the lines of, that accident surely didn't do you any favors as far as getting dates on a Saturday night or something like that. And then that would antagonize the Barber. And I'd actually give Beefcake the Duke here, have him win with the sleeper hold despite Sherry's interference, and have a miscue with Shawn and Sherry, and that could lead to their breakup, because eventually Shawn's going to go on his own and he won't need Sherry, but this could be the start of that. And Beefcake would have kind of a phantom run, and then Shawn would win it back on like Monday Night Raw or a house show or Superstars or Wrestling Challenge or whatever. And yeah, that'd be it. A long-awaited title victory. He actually should have been IC champ if you ask me, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And, a great talent. And he's actually unfortunately suffered a lot of shortcomings since that time. If you watch Dark Side of the Ring, bad drug addiction. He lost his home. And I think he had some falling outs with family. And, he's one of those wrestlers that's really struggled post WWF and post his prime, really. So hope everything's okay with Ed Leslie going forward. All right, match number 7. This would be a basic match, another singles bout. Now this one, in real time, it was Bob Backlund versus Razor Ramon, a very uneventful WrestleMania debut for Scott Hall. He won in less than 5 minutes. Bob Backlund hadn't been seen in WWF since 1984, so he's coming back after an 8-year absence. In December of 1983, He lost the WWE title to the Iron Sheik when Arnold Skolin infamously threw the towel in the match, Madison Square Garden, and that led to Hulk Hogan winning the next month. And he came back in like the fall of '92, and then he had that amazing Iron Man run in the Rumble. He lasted like 61 minutes. Didn't break Ray's record in '06, Mysterio. And in this match, I'd have Bob Backlund versus Yokozuna, just your straight up singles bout, and this would be simply to get the big man over because Yokozuna just debuted for the company in the fall of '92, and wow, did he look impressive. But the problem was he was maybe a little too green. He was only 25, 26 years old, and they pushed him right away based on his size alone to the main event title picture. He won the Rumble, and then, of course, he won the title and then had to drop it several seconds later to Hogan. We all know that story, so I'm not going to drag that one out. But I think Yoko needed more time. Not a whole lot of time, but a little bit more before he got to the world title picture. So this would be a great feud. He could just knock off somebody who's already a legend, established legend at this point in time, and he would only need like 6-7 minutes to do so. And Backlund would put up a fight. And this could be a continuation from the Rumble. And it was one of the stupidest things because Randy Savage, who I think should have won the Rumble that year, knocked him off his feet, did the flying elbow smash, and subconsciously went for the pin, knowing that this was a battle royal, a Royal Rumble match. And then Yoko was able to press slam him over the ropes, and Savage fell to the outside, and thus leading to his elimination from the match. So it made Savage look stupid and weak, and that was the beginning of the end of Savage ever being in the main event title picture again. And so I'd have a completely different result, but we're going to talk about Randy Savage later on in this video. But yeah, Yokozuna definitely should get the win here, and then bigger and better things for Rodney and Hawaii going forward. Next match would be a tag team bout with the Natural Disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon, taking on a somewhat odd pairing of Skinner and the Berserker. Now, I put these two together because if you recall, the 1991 Survivor Series, they were teammates on Colonel Mustafa's team alongside Hercules. And they lost to Hacksaw Jim Duggan's quartet. Now, Skinner and Berserker were kind of on their way out. Their gimmicks were sort of petering out. It was the crossover from the golden era to the new generation. They were both in the '93 Rumble. That's kind of the last I saw of them in '93. Maybe they had a few appearances on Raw or Superstars, Wrestling Challenge. But in this match, it would be a weird pairing, but I'd have the heels go over because I would have the breakup of the Natural Disasters. Because what more can they do? They lost the tag titles, and really wasn't much to them other than two big guys with similar gimmicks having to do with, you know, disastrous weather occurrences on our planet. So, if you recall, the '93 Rumble had both natural disasters in the match. You had Earthquake, you had Typhoon enter first. They were like in the 20s, so it was like later on, later thirds of the Rumble. And then Earthquake came in, but instead of helping out his tag partner, which would be typical in a Rumble match, he attacks him right away and eliminates Typhoon, rams him into a corner, and Typhoon's out. So, got some beef out of the ring, if you will. And in this match, yeah, it would just be a lot of miscues by Earthquake and Typhoon, and then Skidder or Berserker would pick up the pinfall, and then leading to a victory for both of them. And then that would pretty much be it. And yeah, it would just be a complete falling out. And then the reason why this feud never actually played out is because Earthquake left the company right after the Rumble to go back to Japan to learn sumo. And then he came back in like May of '94 and had that sumo match with Yokozuna on Raw, which was actually almost, yeah, definitely much better than what Akibono and the Big Show did many years later at WrestleMania 21. Oh, that was a shit show. That match anyways. So, yeah, that's that for that contest. Next match, we got 4 more to go. This match was actually taken off, I think, due to time constraints. I don't actually remember the reason for this one. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but Kamala versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Kamala's stock had pretty much dropped at this point in time. 2 consecutive pay-per-view losses to Undertaker. And then that led to his face turn. He was a heel with Kim Chi and Harvey Whippleman. Now he's under the tutelage of the Reverend Slick. Reverend Slick, you didn't see a whole lot of except for promotional videos, especially, you know, the Headlock on Hunger campaign. You know, Slick, Ken Johnson is an ordained minister in like Fort Worth, Texas, in reality. So, you know, the whole minister gimmick played up well, Reverend, just like Devon Dudley. And So yeah, in this match, Bam Bam Bigelow had just returned to the company. He hadn't been seen since early 1988. So the fall '92, he returns. Fall '92 had a lot of legendary returns. Backlund, Lawler. Lawler hadn't been in the company yet. He had Doink debut, and then Bigelow returned. A lot of people, it was a big change of time for talent in the fall of 1992, leading into the winter of '93. So this is the result of it here. So getting back to this match, I'd have Bam Bam Bigelow go over because he looked very strong. He had a good singles bout against Big Boss Man. Wasn't quite with Luna Vachon yet, but that was a much better pairing than Luna Vachon and Shawn Michaels. Bam Bam and Luna basically were just two, weird-looking people. Luna was crazy, and he was just kind of buffoonish looking with, his head tattooed and inked, and nobody usually inks their head, but Bam Bam was probably the first person I know that could ever do that. And so Bam Bam would definitely get the win because it wouldn't benefit Kamala to win. And I think Kamala was maybe on his way out of the company. And Bam Bam, they definitely had bigger and better things for him, as evident by the fact that he lasted to the finals of the King of the Ring tournament in '93. Bret Hart, Bam Bam Bigelow. Oh, they had great chemistry together, those two. And then they had a great match on Raw a month later. So yeah, definitely give Bam Bam Bigelow the win here, and I wish they would have given him at least an Intercontinental title win because he was so fucking agile and athletic and able to move around great for a guy nearly 400 pounds. So there you go. All right, match number 10. I actually like this match. A lot of people didn't. Mr. Perfect versus the narcissist Lex Luger. Now, this feud came about because the narcissist debuted at the '93 Rumble in a pose down, in an exhibition. He was just showing off his muscles and everything. Originally, he was going to be brought in as Narcissus, but then they tweaked the name from Narcissus to simply The Narcissist. And Lex, he was basically, brought in out of spite from Bobby the Brain Heenan. Bobby wanted to spite Mr. Perfect for turning on him and Ric Flair at the time, to join forces with the baby faces such as Randy Savage. So this is like, the narcissist is supposed to be Mr. Perfect 2.0 in the eyes of Bobby the Brain Heenan. Bobby Heenan, his managerial days were far behind him. He already closed that chapter of his life. Now he's just a color commentator. But he always supports the heels, as typical of the Brain to do. So I'd still have the narcissist win. He won in real time and still have him win again, with his feet on the ropes, grabbing the tights, whatever. And this would be a great continuation because, I think these two had good chemistry. Maybe they weren't given enough time at WrestleMania 9, but I liked the match for what it was. And Luger's not the greatest worker, so you don't need to give him that much time. Perfect if he had like a Shawn Michaels or a Bret Hart that he was going up against. Give him all the time in the world because those are styles that mesh well together, technically speaking. And so this is like a comeback mania for one Kurt Hennig because he missed much of 1992 due to that back injury, and then he was the executive consultant to Ric Flair, and Flair was already gone out of the company by this point. February '93 was his last obligation, then he was back to WCW. So no Ric Flair to speak of on this show. Match number 11, I'd keep this one the same. The Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. Not the greatest match of all time. Jorge Gonzalez from Argentina was 8 feet tall, weighed 420 pounds. Harvey Whippleman, who was like a good 5'2", 5'3", looked like a child standing side by side next to Jorge. And he couldn't move for shit. And this match was simply just to give Undertaker another credible threat, but Jorge, Giant Gonzalez, looked ridiculous in that airbrushed bodysuit, He was supposed to look like a grizzly bear, Bigfoot, stepped out of the forest. Taker, it's physically impossible for Undertaker to give him a tombstone, so you just have to do clotheslines from the top rope, and it would just be a shitty DQ finish, like what happened in real time, and then they'd have that blow-off match at SummerSlam '93, and not a casket match, but I forget what it was exactly, but anyways, yeah, there's not much I could speak about this match and don't want to anyways, and yeah, that's that. Our last match, this should have been the main event, and I already talked about why Randy Savage should have won the Royal Rumble. So this would be for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Bret the Hitman Hart defending against the Macho Man Randy Savage. Ooh, yeah! And the biggest shame, despite, besides Savage not winning the Rumble that year, was the fact that he was a color commentator for 3 straight hours, 3 fucking hours on WrestleMania, when a year ago he was in the double main event. So, wow, talk about a fall from grace. this is not, like I said in the last video, this is not a voice you want to hear for 3 hours on commentary. You know, Macho Man would talk like this. Bobby Eaton, I don't like where you're going with that, but I'll give him credit. He's taken everything in stride in this match, and I like that about this wrestler. That raspy voice is good in small doses, like promos, but not a commentary. Come on, guys. So, Bret Hart defending against the Macho Man Randy Savage. You know, Macho Man wanted that feud with Shawn Michaels. We'll talk about it at another time. But Bret Hart would have been great. Give these guys 25 minutes to go. Bret Hart with his speed, with his agility and technical prowess, going against Savage's speed, and he didn't do a whole lot of power moves. It was mostly speed and agility. They had the agility in common, but Savage, and they also speed, technical ability, and agility would all mesh well in this match. If you put those three to get things together and you get these two guys, then you're in for something special. And that really should have happened. It's a damn shame it didn't. Now, take nothing away from Bret Hart and Yokozuna. Those two were great together, and I love both their matches at Manias 9 and 10, respectively. But this should have been the main event. Could have been a passing of the torch moment, even though Savage didn't walk in as champion. So Bret would actually retain the title. That's how I would book this. It would, you know, he'd have to win with a victory roll of some sort, inside cradle. And I don't think Savage should tap out with the sharpshooter, because you don't want to make the legend look weak or make him look like, okay, he's done for, because you still want him to look strong afterwards. So have the pinfall victory be that, and then have a class act with both men shaking hands and hugging, and then you can have a little pyro celebration if they, you know, if it gets dark in the evening. And that would be the best way to close out WrestleMania 9. You know, it doesn't always have to be a happy ending or that good feeling, you know, for the show to go home happy, but you know, have it make sense in one form or another. And this would be the time to do it. And Hulk Hogan winning just is shitting all over the product and bringing it back to a bygone period, which we were trying to move forward from. So Hulk always did a disservice anywhere he went because of his goddamn ego. And yeah, if we could rewrite WrestleMania 9 just the way I just talked about in this last half hour, then it would have been one of the greatest manias of all time. With that said, this has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.